commercialization is key. The world is sitting by waiting to see what does robotics and autonomy look like at scale. How do you take something and not have it be custom? How do you take it and not have it just be, I have, 4 pilots? But we're actually seeing 400 customers now adopt this as a standard solution that doesn't need to be custom built every time.
What does it take to build a great ecosystem of universities, startups, large companies, all focused around technology in a region? Pittsburgh Robotics Network is probably one of the best examples of how to do this. We're going to sit down with Jen Apicella to hear exactly what they're doing right here in southwestern Pennsylvania. Jen, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited that you're here in Pittsburgh.
And we're thankful that you showed us the town here in Pittsburgh, because one of the things we do on Made Here and Manufacturing Happy Hour is we like to see how not only the tech community has evolved and what characterizes like a manufacturing community in the city, but we like to see how that's like connected to the culture as well. So no better way to do that in the middle of winter than like a little Pittsburgh restaurant and bar crawl. So let's recap where we went earlier this week. We started at a spot called Grapperia, correct?
That is correct.
Can you describe that for us? You're the Pittsburgh expert here.
Well, I really like the vibe of just sort of a chill place to go. It has maybe like a European kind of, ambiance to it. But Grapperia, right? So they had this really fantastic selection of just grappa, right? Which is a very unique thing to drink, I think. And then, classic cocktails and other things as well. But wouldn't you say like it had like a really fun kind of ambiance?
I like kind of it's because it's not on the main street over there. You kind of like go down a side street and it's very nondescript as you walk in. I would say you characterize it perfectly, because my thought was I tried to meet in the middle because there were a lot of cocktails, there were a lot of grappas, but what I saw was one cocktail that had like a lavender grappa in it as well. So that was the direction I went to try to meet both ways and capture the best of both worlds.
That was a good choice.
So we started there, and then we actually walked across to another spot that felt kind of off the beaten path a little bit. Like it doesn't have a sign out in front. Remind me the name of that spot.
Umami,
that's right. So Umami, we walked up a couple flights of stairs. It had a very much a speakeasy vibe. There's a main part of the restaurant there, but we said like I'm giving my recollection of it. You can do a better job of telling us about Umami.
Yeah, so Umami is a really fantastic restaurant. It's kind of hard to get in, right? You got to have a reservation. It's small, intimate, but I would say a combination of Asian street food and a really high quality robotic grill.
Yeah.
Right. So sushi, some hand rolls, but not your classic stuff. Like if you just want to get yourself a, California maki roll, like this is not the place to go.
Yeah.
You want something that feels a little more elevated in flavors, but they still have some classic things too, right? So we had like the takoyaki and, they have ramen and like
takoyaki are those like octopus balls, basically, right? Is that? Okay.
I call them octopus fritters.
Octopus fritters. That's probably the better way to describe it.
But they're fantastic. So all the food there is really good. Again, cocktail game, super on point. And then the ambiance, right? It has a really interesting vibe. So you can actually just sit at the robotic grill and the sushi bar, and while you're sitting there, just talk to the people making your food.
Yeah.
It's very intimate. Or you can sit at the bar. But we had the benefit of having a bit of a large group. So we had the private room.
Yeah.
Which was, I really like that, when you go and have that experience and you like sit on a pillow.
Yeah.
But then like, you're sitting like, crisscross applesauce.
Yeah.
And, I'm not 25 anymore.
It's like
so
those submerged tables.
Well, I like that they had like a cutout in the floor.
Yeah.
So that you could
right.
still sit like, in a comfortable way, but have that same low to the ground, experience.
Yeah, and for everyone listening out there, Jen, you were just like a master of the menu there. Like you basically, we were at 2 different tables, and you're like, we're doing all these skewers, we're doing this sushi, we're doing like you ordered literally the perfect amount of food covering the perfect amount of variety there. I think you did disclose that you're like, I've had everything on the menu here before. Like I've been around the block at this spot.
Yeah, it was not my first rodeo, so.
Yeah. So, and then came the pivotal moment at the end of dinner where it's like, well, what do we do? Do we do like a nightcap? Do we go somewhere else after that? And I don't know who the enterprising individual was that first brought it up, but they're like, there's this bowling alley up the street called Arsenal, and it's unique in its own right. Tell us about Arsenal.
Yeah, so Arsenal Lanes, it's a bowling alley in the city, right? So you go upstairs, and then there are multiple rooms of the lanes, and then so it feels like you're kind of like walking through this sort of, you're like, oh, okay, this is like bowling for days. What's going on here? And then in the back of the bowling alley with like a whole wall of windows so you can watch the bowling is a really interesting sort of old-timey bar, right? But like not like old-timey like Western vibe or whatever. It had like, velvet furniture and it feels like a speakeasy, right?
Yeah, it definitely has that vibe as well. It was definitely kind of just an overall speakeasy feeling night in Lower Lawrenceville. That was the area we were hanging out. That's like kind of the, for lack of a better word, the hipster neighborhood in Pittsburgh.
It's a hipster neighborhood. It's also part of something that's referred to as Robotics Row.
Yeah, nice tie in there.
Yeah. So it's a place that most of the tech workers all sort of live in, and so it's got, but it's also got a really thriving creative scene as well. But Pittsburgh has, and people don't talk about this a lot, right, historically, but Pittsburgh has a really interesting arts, culture, and food scene, right, where you're just going to find a whole wide variety of things to eat, experiences to have, right, whether you want something like American, like sandwiches, or something, but a spin on it, or some kind of like Asian fusion experience, or, I mean, there's just something for everybody.
Yeah. Well, I remember when we were planning out our evening out, it was like, let's show like the side of Pittsburgh that people don't always see, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with a Permane Brothers sandwich, right? I'm a big sandwich guy, but I'm like, let's go beyond that and see like the other aspects of the town that are there. So it is appropriate that Lower Lawrenceville also doubles as Robot Row, because that's really the direction we're going to go, and quite frankly, you being with Pittsburgh Robotics Network is perfect. Let's start there. Let's say we're having that first cocktail at Grapperia. How do you describe what Pittsburgh Robotics Network does if you're hanging out over a beverage with someone?
Yeah, so I mean, not every city needs an organization like the Pittsburgh Robotics Network, right? We exist because Pittsburgh has over 125 robotics companies that operate here as businesses. And that is a global anomaly, right? Like that is not, you're not going to find that in just your average city. So for a city the size of Pittsburgh, right, the only other two places in the United States that even have that kind of density are going to be Boston and San Francisco.
Yeah.
And so Pittsburgh, Boston, San Francisco are sort of leading the charge in what's happening right now in this sort of autonomy revolution. This industry 4.0, 4.5, 5.0, I've heard it referred
whatever
to
you want to call it.
So many different catchphrases that are happening. But the bottom line here is that there's something happening right now in the world with advanced technology, deep tech. Deep tech, tough tech, hard tech, as it's referred to. And so whether it be the components themselves or the AI platforms that autonomy are built on or full stack, robotics solutions, our organization is here because they all have very similar needs. And they're not like legacy business, right? Legacy business, even legacy tech business, software, an e-commerce website, an app, right? That journey is very predictable.
Yeah.
Largely, it's not very difficult to sort of get in a room and go, I have an idea, I'm going to hire some programmers, or I'm just going to code something, and then you're going to, and that's hard, right? Starting a business, being a startup, that's hard any way you do that for anything. But what happens when you do it for something that the market has not yet realized they need? Or it's a pain the market's experiencing, but they're not sure how to solve it, and they haven't yet budgeted for it because it's a complicated problem. And that could be in any industry, right? That could be in a warehouse, that could be in a factory, that could be in the industrial sector, or it could be in a farm. It could be for a NASA project. It could be going into outer space. It could be for the U.S. military, right? It could be for government. It could be. There's really almost no industry that's not touched now by the need to address labor challenges, labor shortages that they're experiencing. And so these advanced technologies, these companies, it takes a longer time to grow. It's a little bit more of a head scratcher to say, okay, I've got this robot. Now, how do I show it to everybody and convince them to pay me money for it and then start using it? Because as soon as this business buys it, it's going to change their operations.
Yeah.
All right. So it's going to be very disruptive. It's going to solve problems, critical problems, right? Operational problems. It's going to improve efficiency. It's going to reposition their humans into doing different jobs every day. So rather than the humans getting in there and, being maybe ineffective or inefficient in terms of what you're tasking people you hired to do every day, right? Also disillusioning our workforce, right? Making them do things that don't feel fulfilling on that day-to-day, of like going to work and getting paid. It gives them something else to do. These are the power tools of modern business.
Yeah.
Is really what they are.
Well, I'm going to go back to something you were saying at the start of your answer, and that's the very unique community, the very unique setup that you have here in Pittsburgh. How did it all start, right? What allowed you to start creating a network like the Pittsburgh Robotics Network? Take us kind of back to the beginning. Well, maybe not the beginning, because I feel like that starts back in, the history of Pittsburgh with Carnegie Mellon and even further back than that. But where did the Pittsburgh Robotics Network start?
Yeah, so the Pittsburgh Robotics Network began by the community started it themselves.
Okay.
So we had all these robotics companies that were spinning out of Carnegie Mellon University back decades ago. And as that journey progressed, at some point, I believe it was back in like 2015, 2016, 2017, the late 20-teens, we had a critical mass of these companies, and they were continuing to grow, and they were getting stuck. And they all sort of got together and said, we really should have a formal organization that helps us in this journey because we all have the same problems. We all need to come together regularly, and there's a lot of value in doing that, right? Whether that be through a gathering or an event, these are not social events, right? These are professional gatherings where supply chain networks, peer groups, and workforce, right, talent all get together. And when you put a bunch of people like that together, problems can much more easily be solved. So that was the nature of the beginning of it. It started organically as a nonprofit. And then a few years back, really got a very charismatic and business-focused leader who was not an engineer, not making robots, but was a part of this community and said, we really do need to get some funding and some operations and figure out how to now have the resources to actually make programs and move the needle forward. And so that was sort of the origin of the organization. And so I entered in at that stage.
So how do you create, you mentioned the community created. I would assume this has something to do with it. What gives you the ability to bring all these companies together who otherwise might be competing with one another? How do you get them to create such a collaborative community that really advances everyone that's part of the ecosystem here?
So that's a really great question, and I think brings a really unique opportunity to put a spotlight on what makes this community unique. With 125 robotics and autonomy businesses, you'd think there'd be a ton of competition and that they'd be, maybe not willing to share or care with each other. But the answer to that is almost none of them are competitive. This particular community, this ecosystem, has about 8,000 people who work in it. So 8,000 jobs. And across all these companies, they span solutions that serve 18 different markets.
It's like all about applied robotics. So everyone's applying it in a slightly different way, slightly different niche.
That's right. So whether you're making a solution that helps greenhouse farmers to pick tomatoes, and deal with the labor shortages that they're dealing with, but they still have to produce. They still have to pick those tomatoes. They still have to get those, out of the greenhouse and into the world. And so they need to apply some type of machine, some type of technology to help them do that. Or whether it's a componentry, right? Maybe it's not full stack robot. Some of our companies are just creating AI platforms or actuators or pieces and parts and components that the robot companies themselves need, but also so does the world at large and the distributor networks or, just different applications of those technologies around the world, because Pittsburgh's not the only place with robots.
Right, yeah, and this makes sense. As the robotics world grows, there's that multiplier effect. As robotics takes off, other jobs that support the robotics world, whether it's the individual components, whether it's some services that go along with that, all of those start to evolve as well.
That's right. So what you find is that they do have, the one thing they do all compete for is talent.
Mm-hmm.
I will
True.
tell you that.
Yeah.
They all need brilliant people in their companies helping them grow, whether it's on the business side to commercialize, which is a heavy lift, or on the technical side, right? Building these technologies and building great teams of people. Mm-hmm. Because I will tell you right now, the one thing, I'm fascinated by the tech. I have a front row seat to see these innovative, inventions. And I'm deeply fascinated by that. However, the thing that most compels me always are the humans behind these robots.
Sure.
Because humans are the ones with the pain points and the problems that buy and apply these technologies. And humans are the ones who build them and invent them and, have to make those iterations and tweaks to the product to solve those problems. So it's really the humans coming together and the juxtaposition of all that is where I see real creative and innovative magic happen.
What is allowing these companies to be successful here? Or how is Pittsburgh Robotics measuring the success of the work you're doing and how the community is growing and evolving?
Yeah. So what we focus on is economic development, and that's just three basic things. It's a fancy word to say more companies, more investment, more jobs.
Yeah.
Okay, so as these companies are trying to move their work out of the lab and into the world, what they need is, along that journey, they need customers and they need capital investment, right, to sort of be that force multiplier that helps them move faster. And then that allows them to hire talent, right? And that's, again, produces more jobs. And then the investors, right, making sure that there are only certain types of investors that even invest in these types of technologies, right? Like I said, this isn't an app or an e-commerce website or your typical legacy software or legacy tech. And so it takes a special type of investor, a special type of VC fund. And so our work really is to attract all those things here.
Okay.
Because what we have are the assets to invest in.
Right.
And the people, right? The talent that you're just not going to find in other cities that are just already here and have been maybe working at their 8th company.
Yeah.
Right? So finding senior talent, seasoned talent, experienced talent, they're going to come in and they're not going to make those, green mistakes. Those just sort of like, they're not as naive or as like needing that training. They're coming in a little bit ahead of the curve.
So you're looking at the creation of more companies, more capital, more jobs. Now, my next question is like a follow-on to this. How are you helping get technology out of the lab and into the real world? That's the big thing we're looking for as we're exploring around Pittsburgh. And I feel like that is the secret to making all the everything you mentioned that you're measuring happen.
Absolutely correct. So commercialization is key. And that's not just in Pittsburgh. That's across all of this emerging advanced tech right now, right? The world is sitting by waiting to see what does robotics and autonomy look like at scale. Outside of where we've already seen more established success, right? In the industrial sector, factory automation, right? But how do you take something and not have it be custom? How do you take it and not have it just be, I have, 4 pilot projects, but we're actually seeing, 400 customers now adopt this as a standard solution that doesn't need to be custom built every time, right, for each installation or each customer. And so that is what I think we're all witnessing right now.
Another question I have on this thread would be, where does all this energy in Pittsburgh come from? I think we were chatting before the interview and you said, well, it's kind of always been here. Because I think other cities, other regions are looking at Pittsburgh. It's like, well, how do I create Pittsburgh in my backyard? Or create a tech ecosystem that rivals Boston and San Francisco in its own unique way?
Yeah, so it comes back to the humans, right?
Yeah.
So, but also, this is, we're not just getting started here.
Right.
So I think that there is an interesting thing that is happening in Pittsburgh right now, because we're well positioned with markets and with where the world's going. But what people maybe don't understand is this has been about 40 years in the making.
Yeah.
And so what you feel here is this electric energy, this momentum, because you're not coming into something that's sort of like just getting started and scrappy and like, head scratching. Like, how do we approach that? How do we do that? You're coming into something that's much more momentous and much more mature in its evolution. And so, and I have to say, right, Carnegie Mellon University did a really unique thing back in the late 70s by starting, their robotics institute. And then in the 80s released the world's first robotics PhD program. They made some really risky bets doing that.
Sure.
That was at that time, right? They knew that the future was automated.
Yeah.
And they were going to make those investments. And I have to commend them because those were really smart investments. And so from those early days, you have a PhD student. They're inventing something in a lab project. Those projects turned into products.
Yeah.
Those projects spun out, and those early, scientists became entrepreneurs. And they started, a company that maybe just led to a quiet acquisition by a corporate who paid for that research and now said, yes, I will take that, please.
Yeah.
So, we didn't get the flashy headlines, right? There weren't big capital investments, but largely that was happening over and over and over again. And then that individual would then spin out in their next venture, right?
Yeah.
Or partner with their peer who was doing something else, really unique. And so you see this sort of like quiet, just steady sustainability of people who know what they're doing. They know what works and what doesn't work. And they're not afraid to take a shot at it. And then, but you see that happening over, 125 different iterations.
Right.
That's electric. That's exciting.
Yeah. And you gave like a pretty good description of like how do you replicate something like Pittsburgh, and one of the short answers is, well, you needed to start 40 years ago. But I think you have a very good way of summarizing it in a different fashion.
So it's interesting. So we get a lot of outreach.
Yeah.
So we're sort of a global powerhouse now for robotics and AI, and so cities will reach out and go, hey, how can I build a robotics ecosystem just like yours? And that's exactly it. My answer is, well, you need it's kind of like baking a cake, right? You need the right ingredients. And so you need to have like a world-class robotics institute for research and development 40 years ago getting started. And that lays the foundation, and that largely like led to this. But when I'm talking to say, like when I go home for Thanksgiving.
Right.
And like, your Aunt Tina asks you, like, what do you do? And I try to explain to her what I do.
Do you have an Aunt Tina, or did you just pull it?
I just
okay. I was just curious.
Does everyone maybe have an Aunt Tina or an Aunt Linda?
I don't come across many Aunt Tinas, so I'm like, you must really have an Aunt Tina. Anyway, did not mean to derail that.
But yeah, like you're trying to talk to someone to explain like all of this stuff that's going on in a really clear way. And what came to mind to me is just sort of how it feels to me is just imagine you have a backyard. You live in the city, you're a person with a backyard, and across the alleyway, you have this really wild neighbor. And this neighbor's like a mad scientist, and they have like a seed splicing factory in their backyard, and they're just trying to like make all kinds of seeds to plant all kinds of crazy things. Well, just as, things germinate or whatever, the wind blows, and what's landed in your backyard over time are, all of these wild things growing. But also traditional things, right? So let's say, you've got the green peppers and the tomatoes and the cucumbers.
Yeah.
But you've also got these like a crazy watermelon vine and pumpkin and like a pineapple and just all these exotic combinations of a garden.
Yeah.
Well, you could just let it ride, right? But like what you actually have in your backyard is something that naturally would be quite difficult to curate and cultivate with intention.
Yeah.
But now that's what Pittsburgh has. We have this amazing garden just filled with these amazing fruits that we're now bearing. But it needs a gardener.
Yeah.
Right? Because all of these things are not meant to coexist and wildly just grow abundantly and feed the neighborhood without care, without intention, right? So some of these things need to be pruned back. perhaps picked and moved, even transplanted.
Yeah.
And some of them might need to be, the soil might need a treatment, and it might need enriched, right, to keep things going.
Yeah.
And also, we want to take on more seeds, right?
Yeah.
So we need to make space for more things to grow.
Yeah.
And so this is what the Pittsburgh Robotics Network does, right? We cultivate with intention, what was already here, not because we put it here, but because it grew here.
Yeah.
But now it's time to take it to that next level. I always tell people what got us here won't get us there.
Right.
So we have level 2, 3, and 4 problems now, whereas other cities are trying to address and invest in solving level 1. How do we get it here?
Right. How do we get the university working with industry? That seems to be the typical story, right? But you've been doing that here forever, which is why you have this garden pre-built in.
That's right. So we have problems that other cities, from an economic development standpoint, if you go around and visit other cities, sometimes we find that we're like, well, you're solving problems we actually don't even have to solve those problems anymore.
Right.
We have a whole tranche of different problems that are before us because we just have a different ecosystem.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe the easiest way I would summarize this when it comes to like advice for other folks out there, other cities, is that you can't replicate Pittsburgh's garden. Like, that's been growing for a long time. But you can start being the gardener that curates what's there, and then you get more seeds, you build things up, and then eventually you'll be, maybe at a Pittsburgh level in your own unique way. And you're doing that curation at that point and taking it from level 2, 3, 4, etc.
Well, and I think that's a really good point. It's a strong point because a lot of times economic development wants to copy-paste what they see happening in other places. How do I get that here?
Yeah.
And I think that's the wrong approach.
I feel like that's starting to change. I'm hopeful it's starting to change, right? I think I'm hoping most spots are over the how do we become the next Silicon Valley narrative, because I do feel like I am hearing that in other cities. I think they're getting more self-aware of it, like where Pittsburgh has that self-awareness. I just don't know if they figured out how to do it yet, right? It sounds nice to be like, well, we got this university here, we got these big companies, we just got to start getting them together. But there's a lot of things you need to move out of the way to really turn it into a fluid system.
You're totally right. And I think people need to just lean into their strengths.
Yeah.
But to do that, you have to take a really honest inventory of what your strengths and weaknesses as a region are.
Yep.
And then I call it like the hole in the bucket approach. And so you address like where you are losing, right, or where you're missing things, and what is keeping you from filling and overflowing economic opportunity abundance. And so if you just address the holes in the bucket, right, and that's easier said than done. It takes some creative problem solving. Sometimes it's a novel approach. Sometimes it's learning what's happening in other regions, but then adapting it to yours, rather than just trying to transplant something out of region. Just like a plant. I'm big on metaphors, but sometimes you put it in and your soil's too acidic and it won't grow there, right? Or it doesn't have the right conditions.
Yeah.
And so you really just have to know what you got to work with and grow that with intention, because that's where you're going to actually get momentum.
Yeah, I agree. I really liked your line earlier that you said, and you basically just said it again there, like cultivate with intention. And that comes from knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are in a particular city. I think you summed it up perfectly. As we get to the end of our conversation, one thing that's I think that is unique about a group like Pittsburgh Robotics Network is you're a nonprofit in a very for-profit type industry. Like, I don't know if there's a real question here, but what is that like, out of curiosity?
Yeah, it's weird. I'm not gonna lie, it's like super weird, Chris. So this is my first time in a nonprofit.
Oh, okay.
So I actually think that people always ask me, like, what's your background? How did you get here? Are you a roboticist? And the answer is no. You don't want a roboticist running the nonprofit economic development ecosystem, right? Like, a roboticist should be working with robots, building robots, doing technology. I'm a big believer in people with the right skills doing the right jobs, right? So I have a unique background in the sense that I came from global enterprise, corporate business development. And so I saw smarter cities technologies and other, difficult technologies going into market, with corporate resources, enterprise level resources, which is that looks a little different. But it was the same problems, the same pitfalls, the same challenges, right? Long times in between to get from prototype to iterate and then get on people's budgets, right? Longer sales cycles, longer incubation times, different exit strategies, different pitfalls. So what I would say is that commercialization is the way all of this works. And so having a nonprofit that is more for-profit minded, right, with focus on the business development challenges and the focus on just, the work that we do. I tell people, like, we don't make robots, the Pittsburgh Robotics Network. We don't sell robots. We're not in that business. We're in the business of the companies and the people who are doing that. And so our job is to collect data from them, to sit down with them, to listen to what their needs are, and also to tell the world what's happening here.
Yeah.
Because, to be honest with you, Pittsburgh, it's not top of mind usually for people. Like, oh, I got to get to Pittsburgh this year. I'm going to Pittsburgh.
I like coming to Pittsburgh. I like the baseball stadium. I like Kennywood. I like the scene here. There's a lot of good stuff in Pittsburgh. Don't undersell it.
I'm not underselling it, but I'm just from the brand perspective,
Sure,
right? We're not
sure.
New York City.
Yeah, fair.
People aren't like, oh, I got to go to New York this year. I can't wait to go, I think they should.
Yeah.
I live here, and I know that there's something very special happening here that just people aren't aware of till you come here.
Yeah.
And that's a bit of a bummer. I hope we can change that. But like Pittsburgh's having a renaissance right now as a city. There's tons of cool stuff happening here, not just in business, but lifestyle, human-centered stuff. Like, it's a really unique town in general. But I will say that in terms of the commercialization aspect and trying to make sure we have the right resources here for the companies to commercialize.
Yeah.
New York City has finance markets and, pretty much every market there. So they have resources we don't have. San Francisco, right? Same thing, right? They have venture capital networks we don't have. But what I know is that money goes anywhere to find the right thing to invest in.
Yeah.
And so that is what we are focused on, both here in our backyard, problem solving for these companies. What do you need? You need to talk to more corporates. You need more leads. You need to go to market faster. Okay, great. Why don't we do some introductions for you?
Yeah.
Right. So we can be that liaison in between brokers and that does actually, that's a for-profit function in a lot of ways. But I think what keeps it focused, what keeps it anchored on the region, what keeps it really, what makes it Pittsburgh special, right, or tailor-made for Pittsburgh is that we're focused on the community.
Yeah.
We're focused on making sure that the talent here is happy and that they stay here and that more people come here. We're focused on making sure these businesses grow here. If you're a business, like if you're a robotics business and you're located out in, name a small city, right? Anywhere in the United States. Why wouldn't you want to move here where you have this community and advocates, a whole team, a whole organization that's trying to just feed you everything you need to grow your business?
Yeah.
The value proposition for that is huge.
Well, I do have a question on this because I'm sure some people are going to move to Pittsburgh, but some are probably going to stay. People are listening to this all across the country. And I think one of the things people can learn from this is, like, what advice do you have to folks that want to be, like, a better part of their community and, be successful with commercializing their own businesses? Because it's a two-way street, right? You're putting out a lot of resources, you've built that community, but the other folks here do need to get involved to make it happen, too. It's not, you're not just giving them a layup. Like, there's work that these companies on the other side need to be putting in as well. What does that work, that involvement look like?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the stakeholder that's doing that work. So if you are a business owner and you're involved in manufacturing and you want to be, you want to be the producer for these robots, or you want to be partnered in the manufacturing piece in your region, or if you are a advanced technology company, whether you're on the supply chain side or you're on the development side, I think it's just really important that you stop being obsessed with the technology. Yeah. I think you can get lost in the sauce there. And it's easy to become deeply in love with the lore of this tech. But at the end of the day, these are tools. Yeah. And if nobody's using them or nobody needs them at scale, then, perhaps you need to rethink the tooling. Right? Because it's really great to make a piece of art and hang it on your wall, just like it's really neat to make a tool and put it on the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
But I think engineers and people at large would like to see whatever it is they're creating be used,
Yeah.
be applied, see it in motion.
Yeah.
And that's what commercialization is all about.
Yeah.
And so I would say that regardless of where you're located or what you're doing, rather than being inspired by the technology, be inspired by the problem that it's solving.
Yep.
And make sure that that problem isn't just a onesie, twosie problem because you've just had a couple conversations and it's novel.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can, right? That's a small business. That's a consultancy, and that's perfectly fine. But if we're really going to see this take off, if we're really going to start changing the world, right? Especially as the United States, if we really want to see the United States shine in innovation, then we have to be laser focused on, is this a critical problem that en masse is happening in industry?
Yeah.
And how do we tailor make the tool to be able to address that without requiring 20 people to put their hands on it?
Yeah. I like what you described about Pittsburgh solving real problems, real scale, like things that can scale. I feel like that is a common thread I've heard, not even just the interviews we've done this week, but just any time I have a conversation with someone about Pittsburgh. So one thing that I think, at least from my perspective as an outsider here, is that a lot of people are on the same page. It would be hyperbole to say everyone's on the same page, but it kind of feels that way sometimes. So that's one thing that I have a lot of respect for Pittsburgh. Another area as we wrap up that I want to ask you about, you mentioned you're looking at growth of companies, capital investment, more jobs. One of the things you said early in the interview was what got us here today isn't going to get us to tomorrow. So let's start looking ahead here. How have things been progressing in just the past few years, and how do you see things going into, let's say, the next 5-year window or so?
Yeah, so I would say what I'm noticing are a new wave of entrepreneurs being mentored by some of the more senior people who have those battle scars, have learned from it, right? And they're taking notes and applying that in real time. So I think peer-to-peer networking, the peer-to-peer networks, I'm starting to see catalyze much more. And I think that's because people feel the momentum, they feel the market opportunity. Because let's be clear, 5 to 7 years ago, I don't think automation and advanced technology was being purchased at the rate that it is now incentivized to purchase at.
Right. We had a big world event that I think helped push it in that direction a little bit.
This is true.
Yeah, we didn't let the pandemic go to waste.
This is true. So I think that spark, right? But then also the whole wave of Gen AI and AI and all of a sudden the world is now woken up to be okay.
Yeah.
I've got to implement these technologies because my competitors are all doing that.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to be globally competitive, right, which now we have this global, marketplace that we're all operating in. If we're going to stay globally competitive, we can't hem and haw and just look at the tech and pilot it and play with it. So I think the market largely was doing the same thing we were seeing our PhD founders and our highly technical founders doing.
Everyone was behaving like a PhD.
There was a lot of research.
They were obsessed with the tech. Yeah.
And so but it was risky to adopt.
Yeah.
Let's be clear, a business that's going to buy something that's a piece of hardware, right? It's not like you're just going to switch that out in a year. It's a big investment. It's a big investment of time. It's a big investment of dollars. It's a big investment of the operational impact it has. So you're making a real commitment, a real investment to transform your business. So of course you want to be thoughtful about that. Of course you don't want to make an impulsive decision. Again, it's not software. It's not a SaaS solution. You buy a subscription, you cancel it if you don't like it.
Yeah.
It's a real game changer in business. But I think what's happening is those early days of pilots and stuff are starting to pay off. They've learned lessons. They've figured out there is a way to do this that actually gets you that ROI. The second thing I think we're noticing is all the platform tech is evolving and becoming cheaper and more commoditized. So it's bringing the cost down to implement these solutions in a scalable way as well.
Yeah.
So all the risk factors are starting to become less risky. Both the time, the understanding, the impact, and then nobody wanted to be first to do it. So they're starting to see, okay, did you buy it? And how did that tank your team? What were the critical errors? So at industry conferences, we're seeing those lessons learned to be shared. And we're seeing FOMO. We're seeing people start to show off.
Yeah.
Right? They're like, look at this automation I bought. Like, and they're like, crap, oh my gosh, like I should have bought that last year.
Yeah.
So people are starting to see that those ROIs are being fully realized, and those businesses are starting to excel.
Yeah, you're totally right. Looking at I think the overall vibe that you just shared was they've done their R&D, the costs are coming down. All these things added together means the risk is coming down. And I was just chatting with Jeff from Mosbach Industrial Solutions Network yesterday. He's like, AMRs are the big thing right now, and I agree. They're one of those areas that are big because people have seen their friends doing it. It's now taking the risk is more. It's just asking your neighbor. It's like, hey, how's that working out for you? Oh, good. All right. Well, yeah, let's invest in that as well. That's at least one really concrete example I see of how the automation world is evolving and people are getting more comfortable adopting these things.
Yeah, the market intelligence that I'm seeing is showing that the market is becoming more intelligent about these things.
Well
so
said.
Yeah, we're starting to see just not like a one-off or only the big corporates are doing this because they can afford to and they must, but everyone now has to do it. Small to medium-sized businesses have to do this as well, or they're going to just largely be left in the dust.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're noticing this, but AI is changing the global economy. There are going to be the haves and the have-nots. Businesses are either going to evolve or they're going to die. These are the harsh realities of the world we're living in, and it's a beautiful time, right? Any kind of industrial revolution, any kind of major, revolution like this is going to be largely highly disruptive to all humans. Society is going to change, right? People are going to change. Businesses are going to change. Are you on the right side of that change is what I would ask you to really thoroughly reflect on.
I was going to ask you for an actionable comment at the end of this conversation, but I think you just nailed it perfectly. So, well, Jen, I appreciate you taking the time. It's always fun hanging out. Great to finally visit, the robotics factory in Pittsburgh Robotics Network. So appreciate you taking the time to jump on the show.
Yeah, so glad you were able to make it out.
Yes.
Come to Pittsburgh anytime.
Yes, I will be back for bowling and Asian fusion anytime.
Awesome.
So, thanks again.
Thank you.